Hi everyone, welcome back from lunch. Hope you were able to enjoy a good meal, have some good conversation. I'm really excited to kick off our first afternoon panel today. I'm not sure if anyone in the room was at last year's Retail Innovation Conference, but we had another panel of the same name, Meet the Disruptors. And last year we were able to speak with some really emerging cutting-edge brands who are testing new business models, using technology in really interesting ways. And this year, I'm really excited to have a whole new set of retail executives, tech entrepreneurs, who are really pushing the business boundaries and are encouraging their peers to kind of rethink the way they define retail, the customer experience, and so many other terms and trends that we're talking about today. Is it going? No slides. Well, to kick things off, I'd love for our panel to just introduce themselves, share their roles, a little bit more about their organization, and then we'll kind of kick things off with the conversation. Ratna, you want to kick things off?
Yeah, hi, I'm Ratna Sharad. I am the CEO and founder of Flavor Cloud, and we enable retailers of all sizes to go global through our cross-border commerce as a service. So essentially, we make global shipping and logistics as easy as domestic.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Alexandra Wilkes-Wilson, and just recently launched my third startup, which is called FITZ, F-I-T-Z. Previously had co-founded Guilt and a company called Glam Squad. And what FITZ is doing, we are headquartered here in New York City. We are a service where we send two highly trained, experienced fashion stylists into a client's home to organize their wardrobes, edit out pieces they no longer need. We take care of resale, donation, sending items to the cobbler, to the tailor, etc. We help them put outfits together with their existing pieces of what they already own, and then we help these clients to fill in the gaps of what they're missing. So we work, I'm sure, with many of you in this room. We have over 400 affiliate relationships with brands and retailers, and we're off to the races. We're only 4 months in, but we're growing really, really quickly.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ryan Craver. I was just looking at this slide, and I totally just realized how boring my picture is relative to the other two panelists. I mean, like, Alexandra's got this cool thing going. Ratna's so cool she can't even look at the camera. Like, I need to change it up. But I came from the department store space, so I was at Hudson's Bay, Lord & Taylor, Saks, and then I moved into the brand space. So I'm in the licensing business. So we'll go to a brand and we'll let them know that we can design, manufacture, source, sell, fulfill anything and everything that they want. Predominantly within the apparel space today, we've got brands like New Balance, Joe Fresh, Asics, Saucony, Victoria's Secret Pink, a couple others. And we sell them to everyone from Kohl's to Amazon to our own direct-to-consumer businesses.
Yeah. And what I find most interesting about this panel of executives here is that they're kind of in the middle of several worlds here. They're in the middle of retail, technology, and customer service and experience. And I know in some of the sessions this morning, and you'll be hearing a lot more in the other sessions the rest of today, how we kind of need to expand our thought process and how we further refine and improve the customer experience by being equal part retail executive and equal part, technologist or, tech entrepreneur in a certain respect. So that kind of leads us to our first question. We've been hearing a lot about, the convergence of channels and, the commerce convergence. So the lines between digital and physical, they're blurring. They're continuing to blur. We've been talking about this for a while now, but, we're really reaching new milestones in that regard. So, I'd love to ask Alexandra first, because you have such heritage in that domain, with Guilt and, Glam Squad and now FITZ. How has this convergence not only challenged you as someone who has such deep roots in retail, but how has it inspired you, in terms of coming up with your new ventures and of course coming up with new customer experiences and new customer service options?
So I could speak all day about this because I think it's interesting from a psychological perspective. But what I'll say in our short time together is what I think is starting to happen with a lot of consumers who have become so comfortable shopping online, whether it's on their phones or on their computers or their iPads, they don't even know how they're buying. They're just kind of buying digitally very comfortably. Is a lot of times we're making those purchases by ourselves. So we're making the decisions by ourselves. We're not necessarily in a fitting room getting the advice of a sales associate or a stylist or a personal shopper. We're making these decisions alone. Maybe through social media you'll get input from your friends. Certainly the millennials will, but they're still not necessarily seeing you try it on. And what's happening, what we've seen with Fits is, the typical story of I have a closet filled with clothes but nothing to wear, and I don't know necessarily how to put things together. Don't necessarily want to be shopping all the time for pieces. I'm sure there are pieces a client would own that they could recycle and kind of bring back. So what we're doing at Fits is really trying to give truly kind of unbiased, neutral advice. Our stylists are not paid on commission. To help clients get smarter about putting outfits together. We can document lookbooks for them so that they know kind of literally what to wear every single day of the week. If they're going on a trip, business trip, trip for pleasure, their honeymoon, whatever it is, they can have all their outfits planned in advance. We will be doing that digitally very soon. Right now it's a little bit kind of done more manually. It's interesting. I think of myself as kind of a tech, fashion, beauty person. I like the intersection, but what we're doing at Fits is we're starting it in a very manual, brick and mortar way, and with time, very quickly, it will become much more tech enabled. But what we're learning through this very intimate, personal kind of experience with our clients, and we're obsessed with data, so we collect a ton of data, all of that will eventually be translated into a digital model.
That's great.
I think that, from my perspective on the brand side, I think originally what got me so excited about tech in stores and bridging tech to both the initiation of a purchase or the idea of a purchase all the way through to the fulfillment was things like beacons and cameras and heat maps and all that BS, right? And then it kind of moved into this position where it was like promotional. So now we can push coupons based upon proximity to a store and all that kind of stuff. And I was so excited about those first two things that I never really realized what percentage of actual purchases were driven by mobile as a shopping assistant. And what does that mean? What that means to me is that when you are looking at a product that we sell in a Macy's, my ability to sell it in Macy's is going to be driven by how successful I'm also on Amazon, how successful I am on, say, Walmart, or how successful I am on Jet. If I don't have product reviews that are strong for that product because they're doing so much window shopping using their mobile phone, although they're in a Macy's, then I really struggle to actually do that. I also struggle to sell it well in a store if I'm not telling Google that it's in the Macy's that's in close proximity to that customer. So I was so focused on the tech in the stores. I was so focused on everything around the stores and all the cool stuff that I didn't realize the simple things. Keep it simple, stupid, like the mobile shopping companion. Hers is a lot more high touch, but we can take small general steps to make sure that the customer is assisted along that process.
And I think for me, I look at this in a very different lens, because what we do is we're essentially enabling international shopping and making that whole experience Amazon-like. So what's really important for the customer is it doesn't matter, they see it on Instagram and they see, let's say it's from China, you still want the complete tracking. You want to be able to have it delivered in 3 to 5 days, because they expect expedience, they expect they don't care of all of the challenges with customs or duties or any of that. And so making that whole experience super seamless and friction-free from a consumer standpoint for the international purchase. But also the second way we look at it is because we enable retailers, whether they are brick and mortar retailers or they could be marketplaces. So whether it's an on-demand or you have fulfillment centers that have pick and pack services and these storefronts and you're shipping from there. So our real goal is to have these plug-and-play solutions that are really easy for retailers to integrate, regardless of their model, regardless if you're a marketplace that has sellers in 100 countries around the world, really making that whole process super seamless from the retailer perspective as well.
And Ratna, how does that tie into, because we initially met because of Runway to Street, so I know that that's a component of the business or has helped fuel the underlying foundation of your technology, right? So can you share a little bit about that story?
A little bit of background on how we got to Flavor Cloud. So I spent 10 years in supply chain logistics, actually working with third-party logistics providers. I also worked for carriers like UPS. And a lot of what I did, I come from a tech background, so we built the international hub cross-border commerce movement. I also worked with customs organizations on export-import country regulations and all of that. And then I switched and I worked for Microsoft on their enterprise stack advertising solutions I was director of product for their advertising stack. And in that, I saw two things. One is that small and medium businesses, but also larger retailers. We had eBay and Amazon part of our platform. That they were finding that their customers were increasingly online and that they were increasingly international. So what I really wanted to solve was the international experience for the customer, but also for the retailer. So we started Runway to Street as a small and medium brand platform where they could sell easily internationally. We started with 3 countries, grew to 100 countries around the world, representing 300 brands. And so what we learned from that is that, and our back end is Flavor Cloud. So we created this SaaS platform with a set of services that enabled all of these small and medium businesses to go global. But then we realized that, it is so complex and it is so difficult for even the really large retailers to have in-house expertise, whether you're classifying products and getting through customs, or you're trying to deal with the right carrier, figuring out how to integrate and create a seamless experience, not just for shipping, but also returns, which can be a bigger nightmare for international, as you guys probably know. And so our goal was we realized that we needed to create these services that anybody can leverage and plug in and say that you can offer that seamless experience to the customer.
And I think, it brings us to a really critical point that, technology has really leveled the playing field in a lot of ways. So to Ryan's point, how smartphones and mobile technology allow us to get closer to the customer and the customer closer to us and our products. How e-commerce has given even the smallest of brands easier access to consumers all over the world. And I feel like the level of innovation and disruption just keeps amplifying. And some trends a little more shiny and a little more obscure than others. But I thought this would be a good opportunity to hear from you guys, since you do come from all of these different worlds. What trends or disruptions happening right now are impacting you as an executive who's in this space, but also as someone who is also a consumer? I mean, what do you think holds the most opportunity? What inspires you the most, from a business standpoint? Ryan, do you want to kick things off?
Sure. Okay. So I'm going to start really high, and then I'm going to try and get low and then back up. What's amazing to me trend-wise is if you look at the brand world, you look at the retail world, you look at how we're spending our cash in our pockets, there's been a lot of change, right? So department stores struggling tremendously, correct? It's moved to a lot more off-price. You look at home improvement, it's been doing phenomenal. You look at health as overall spend, we're spending a lot more on our health. You look at rent, we're spending a lot more on our rent. So that's actually driven down the costs that we're spending on things like apparel. And what has that created? I think it's created a world that has been somewhat of a race to the bottom, or somewhat of a way in which they're creating brands that are trying to eliminate all the middleman that they can. And what that has done is it's allowed small-time brands, startups, through technology, through those spend trends, to be able to set themselves up and be successful. What do I mean by that? Well, the ability for someone to open a Shopify site tomorrow, the ability to start drop shipping for Amazon, for Walmart's marketplace, for Jet's marketplace, for a brand to do that, it's never been easier. We could start a brand tomorrow if we all wanted in this room, and we could call it whatever the heck we wanted. That has changed a lot of retailers in the way in which they're doing business. They continue to see the store traffic going down. They continue to see the cost of actually shipping and fulfilling .com orders going up. And then all the brands that they are carrying are kind of opening their own stores. So that's made a lot of change, and it's created a lot of opportunities for some small-time brands to try and get bigger. At the same side, you've got the Zaras and the Uniqlos and the big guys who have become true global dominant players. And for me, I think that that shift, not only in technology, but also in your wallet share and where we're spending our money and who we are as retailers and where everything's moving, has created a number of opportunities for smaller brands to try and see what they can do.
Now, Alexandra, from your standpoint, Fitz is still relatively young, but you still have so much heritage in tech, through your past initiatives. So where do you see, your business evolving to? So you kind of keep that high touch element of your business, but, tech is kind of ingrained a little bit more. What do you see as a pretty significant opportunity as far as your future?
I see a lot of opportunities in our future. One that I think could be interesting in the context of this conference is, and I did a lot of this at Glam Squad with a beauty perspective, but now doing it more from an apparel and accessory perspective. I think as we scale our business, brands should ultimately be, and retailers should be using Fitz and our Fitz stylists as their in-home sales force. So making life more convenient for our clients. We're going into a client's home. If a brand were basically to give us in advance, we already know the client. We know she's a size 6. We know what colors she likes. We know she doesn't wear print, but she will wear a strap. We know all of these levels of details. We know how many kids she has. We know pets. We know her apartment. We know her closet size, et cetera. We know where she goes on vacation. We know a lot. And if we worked with a retailer or a brand, and they, in advance of our next visit to her, supplied us with, let's say, 20 items that were in her size, at her taste level. We could ask questions in advance of the visit and basically help her be her stylist, but on behalf of a brand. I think that's interesting, and could help with some of these brands with personalization in a way that they're not necessarily set up for, wouldn't be their core competency. I see, in general, not necessarily directly related to what we're doing, but I see a lot of changes in consumer behavior, I think led by a millennial outlook and perspective, but not, I'm not a millennial, I'm older than that, but that can permeate into older and even younger generations. So thinking about this notion of decluttering, if you think about millennials aren't necessarily as attached to stuff as Gen X or baby boomers. They're not necessarily brand obsessed, status obsessed in the way that my generation had been at their age, let's say. So a lot of these sort of trends in their overall behavior, we know about transparency, et cetera, I think is affecting the growth of companies like Rent the Runway, or Rent the Runway has a competitor that I've been spending time with called Armarium, which is like a luxury Rent the Runway. Then you have the Real, and so you with all this resale world, so renting and buying and selling secondhand doesn't have the stigma that it might have had 5 years ago. Consumers are comfortable doing it. They're making their purchasing decisions based on how they think about what would resell. So if they're shopping low price points, they might be checking ThredUp to see if that's a brand that ThredUp would accept. Or if they're doing peer-to-peer reselling, they're looking at companies like Poshmark, et cetera. I mean, there are tons of resale companies right now that seem to be growing incredibly quickly. So I think the way consumers are just thinking about making their purchasing decisions has a lot more factors that maybe previously had never kind of come into their mindset.
I think that's spot on, and I think that they're more fickle when they are actually buying. The fact that the cost of a t-shirt, and this is an amazing statistic, in the last 15 years is down 42% versus everything else that we're spending more money on, like it's beat inflation. In fact, it's down in the average cost. Just tells a huge story as to how much we're willing to pay for something when we're actually buying it or renting it.
That's fascinating stuff. And we kind of touched on this already, but I think, the direct-to-consumer dynamic, Ryan, you kind of touched on this a little bit more. But, I mean, from a retailer's perspective, I mean, how do you navigate that, especially when there are so many options and, they're getting the consumers closer to the brands easier or at a better price or, with free shipping and returns? I mean, how do you manage that dynamic, or is technology the answer? I mean, from an experience standpoint, what needs to be done for retailers?
I think it's the basics. Let me use an example. Let's use New Balance. So New Balance, we signed a license deal with them 2.5 years ago, and we make all of their men's and ladies' underwear in the U.S., Canada, Israel, and Japan. And they came to us and they said, we need you to start doing the direct-to-consumer for us. We said, well, we'll offer it on your site. Do you want us to open a secondary site? What do you want to do? And the number one problem we had, and the number one problem we see with most brands, is the logistics side of the business. They usually can figure out the tech. They usually can put together a shopping cart. They can pretty much figure out how to buy traffic and get it to them. It's all willingness of how much they're willing to pay. But the logistics is always a problem because of the cost, because of what Amazon has led us to believe that we should be able to get same-day shipping now. And it's always the inhibitor. So what we've done is we've started to see the growth of marketplaces. You name the marketplaces. The original was eBay. The next one was Amazon. The next one was, Etsy, Jet, Walmart, et cetera. And the one differentiator with the marketplaces is you're usually not taking care of your logistics if you're running it through Amazon. And so all of these brands that we have, the Joe Freshes, the Sauconys, all of them are like, throw it into Amazon. Because we know if we put it up on Amazon and it's fulfilled by Amazon, it's going to make the customer happy. It's going to get there. It's going to get there either same day, next day, or even Sunday, because they work with the United States Postal Service. So our biggest struggle has been logistics, and where we have the ability to service the customer, we've used things like Amazon FBA, which has completely disrupted direct-to-consumer.
Got it.
And actually, that's why we exist.
Yeah, that's why we were talking beforehand.
Yeah.
That's why I need a picture like this.
FBA doesn't do international, right? So if
Right.
logistics is hard
Domestic.
for domestic,
Yeah.
you can imagine how impossible it is for international, right? And that's why a lot of what we do is we have to be a horizontal layer that is able to look at it from a very different lens, not just optimize for one specific retailer or marketplace, but really bring that innovation in that layer so any marketplace can offer that logistics, right? And typically these brands are going to marketplaces because of two things. The most important thing is eyeballs, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's the biggest thing that any of these marketplaces offer. But a lot of them have other benefits that you can get. But logistics is not one of them. And that's where, you know, we come in and say, whether you're a retailer or a marketplace, especially if you look at the numbers now, in the last 2 years, I know you mentioned this before, but international used to be 10% of traffic to any website. Now it's around 40 to 50%. So what are you doing about that 40 to 50%? Does that actually translate to conversions on your site? And more importantly, in terms of an experience, does it create stickiness like an Amazon, where they will come back because they had a fantastic experience for international? That's you know, great with shipping and with returns, and it's super seamless, and that's not happening. So that's really the biggest opportunity as far as I can see. And if you're not thinking about it, and we've seen a lift of around 60 to 80%, it varies geographically, when you offer seamless logistics.
You do realize that everyone in the audience now thinks we colluded and I set you up for that pitch. So now that the cat's out of the bag, I would like some commission if anyone signs a deal.
Yeah.
No, it's great. And I think when we talk about, you know, the global e-commerce phenomena, I think, you know, beyond logistics, there are so many other factors that need to be taken into account as well when you're trying to, you know, appeal to different audiences that have different preferences. You know, there are different, you know, experiential needs. There are different colors or types of content that, you know, global shoppers respond to. So it's interesting when we're thinking on a global scale that, you know, although logistics is kind of that foundational layer that's critical, there are so many other, you know, elements that retail executives need to take into account.
I'd add one kind of totally different angle, but my impression is big companies, let's say, that really had a wholesale heritage, that maybe had to do less marketing because they could rely on the marketing of their retailers, department stores, et cetera. When they're trying to go direct to consumer on their own, one, it gets tricky and a bit competitive with the hand that originally fed them, and that's kind of one whole dynamic. But the other is that they have to create an infrastructure and an org structure that allows them to be entrepreneurial in direct-to-consumer, in my opinion. So whether that's freestanding stores, if they didn't have a store model before, certainly their e-commerce site, et cetera. And my suggestion, obviously every brand is going to be totally different, but if they can lose some of the kind of political and bureaucratic things that will slow them down, I think it would really benefit them in direct-to-consumer as they're competing against whatever their category is, but companies that are nimble and fast-moving and have more of like a startup, fast-paced approach.
I think that's very well said. The brands that aren't digitally native that started digitally, I mean, I was in those meetings. We would sit around the table and we're like, so we need to juice sales on .com. What are we going to do? And we all kind of were like learning as we were going along. We were like, maybe we should try affiliates, or maybe we should boost display. We didn't really know. So I think unless that infrastructure isn't set up, you're going to fail. One, but two, more importantly, if it's not set up to quickly respond, because you're not used to being that dynamic. Like you can run a BOGO in a store in cosmetics very easily, but if you don't know how to do that other piece on digital, then you're a mess.
Great. So a quick follow-up question to that then. I mean, say the technology is in place, you know, you're raring to go, but what about from an actual employee standpoint, you know, within the executive team? I mean, how are the requirements or skill sets changing within the modern retail organization or within a company like Fitz, that it's, you know, equal parts service and high touch, but also, you know, there's an element of, you know, tech savviness and, you know, being able to think outside the box and be quick and agile and disruptive?
I mean, I probably have a different perspective than a lot of other people. Right now, I'm just obsessed with finding really, really, really smart athletes. Athletes, quote unquote, so slightly more general. I'd rather someone who's incredibly bright, can problem solve, can think on the job. We are in a startup, so maybe we can't necessarily compete on cash comp versus an established company, but people who won't take no for an answer, will, in a startup, especially a service-oriented one. I mean, now everyone in e-commerce, same thing. Like, it's 24 hours. Well, we're not 24 hours a day. We're 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., but we're 7 days a week. So, being on Slack on the weekends to handle all kinds of crazy customer requests, like rushing something from the Container Store or something like that, things that we do in our appointments is really important. But, really hiring smart people who might not exactly on paper have the exact domain expertise and the functional expertise of the job requirement, but show many examples of achievement. And that can be in totally unrelated things, like what they did in college. I mean, we have a fairly young team, I would say. So, looking for people who are really excited to learn on the job, and we have a culture where it's okay to make mistakes. Don't make the same mistake twice, and it's we do a ton of testing, and we all have ideas, and let's test those ideas. Not every idea is going to work or be a good one, but let's try and learn and kind of keep moving. And I think something in all the startups I've been involved in, and we just made a big hire. We hired the fashion director from Bloomingdale's, named Brooke Jaffe. She'd been at Bloomingdale's for 10 years. She just came to us, and she's incredibly bright and hardworking, but she was like, her second day, she was like, it looked like she'd been hit by a truck. She's like, the pace that you guys operate in is like nothing I have seen. And she was at Bloomingdale's 10 years, in Style, Vogue before. The pace of a startup is frenetic, and I think people in more old school environments just don't realize how crazy it is.
I'd have to completely agree with that. I mean, we're a small team, we're a startup. There's certainly tech-heavy roles, but in general, I want people that are smart and curious and just can do so many things, because it's not that it's just the tech or the logistics or understanding retail or enterprise stack. It might be a whole different thing that we're exploring. It's getting on the phone with the carriers, or actually solving customs clearance issues. It could be any number of things. So I just look for people that are excited about the space and what we're doing, and have curiosity.
That's great. We're already almost out of time. Wow. Okay. Better get moving. So the one final area I want to touch on with you guys, especially Alexandra, since you're coming from the in-person consultative selling, building in-person relationships with consumers, which I think that there's always going to be a place for that. But now there are so many technologies and touch points that are trying to not only digitize that, but automate it as well. We talked about earlier in the keynote with Amazon's Echo Look, and how that will kind of disrupt, the service component of selling. What are your perspectives on, the balance between high touch and in-person selling versus technology? How will you, as a growing business, try to navigate that? And do you have any recommendations for the retailers in the room that are like, what is this Echo Look like? What do I do now?
I think we're all curious about Echo Look, but I'm on the wait list if anyone has any connections here. No, I think the world is changing very rapidly. Behaviors are changing really quickly, and I think most of us would be lying if we knew exactly how it's going to pan out. So is AI important? Yes. Is image recognition important? Yes. Virtual reality, all of that, super important. How it plays into fashion and shopping behavior, I think we'll see. I don't think we know yet exactly how it will really translate, and will it just translate to a very kind of digitally native consumer, or can it translate to my parents' generation as well? My guess is that will be harder. So I think it has to be consumers who are you know, when you think about when your laptop, initially when it had a camera in it, and Skype was coming around, like that was a really weird behavior. Like, wait, I'm gonna be on a computer and there's a camera there, like who's on the other end, who's watching me, you know? It was like, no, the camera's off and you can turn it on and you can have a conversation. Like, I feel like we're almost kind of going through our own version of that with, let's say, a device like this, or many other devices, which I'm sure are gonna be created. But I think that's part of the fun, is seeing not every technology works. We've seen lots of things that don't work or don't catch on. You look at Google Glass or something like that. But then a lot of them, you know, that change behavior radically forever and ever, like the iPhone, which probably most of us in this room are pretty dependent. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to actually see that on the mobile phone as opposed to a separate device, you know. I think it's just a matter of time.
I think we are continuing to become more desensitized to our privacy, and I think that we don't really care. I really think that as long as we are provided a value for giving up our privacy, and we'll continue to give up more and more of our privacy, that we will continue to become, you know, an A/B test. And I think that brings some interesting experiences with brands. So like whether it's Amazon now going a lot further with non-consumables, whereas on the consumable side they have the Dash, which is what I call thoughtless commerce, so it just keeps coming, and the subscription services and all that kind of stuff. But I think that over time we are really going to start to see that there truly are still purchases that we do believe need higher touch, need a store, need a physical presence. But it's going to take the retail industry a lot of grooming, and it's going to take a lot of store closures, and it's going to take a lot of downsizing, and all that's driven by experiences that are going to move the share from brick and mortar to tech.
That's great. Well, we have the red light blinking at us, but before we close things out, I would love to go in line with you guys and just, you know, have you share, you know, one final word of advice and, you know, one trend, or, you know, it could be even an app or a technology that you're most excited about and you think has the most potential for retail or for your business.
Interesting. Okay.
This wasn't on the script.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm pissed.
I think, you know, I'm actually most excited about fit and how that can be solved. You know, you see different things. People have tried so many things. And I don't know that's been solved yet by any of these solutions that are out there. But I think something like Alexa, which can incorporate machine learning and really kind of do a good job at fit, is something that's exciting. It's not there yet. So I don't have something that I can pitch.
I mean, I'll say what I often say when I'm on the stage. You know, I believe in building relationships with people. I think all of you have come to this conference today. I hope you're all going to build relationships and network with one another. And I'm sure many of us are dealing with a lot of the same challenges, but maybe coming at them from different angles, and just kind of sharing and learning from one another, from different companies, I think can ultimately benefit all of us.
Ryan?
No particular tech or problem, just more so place bets. I think it's the saddest news ever when I see an innovation lab close, or I see some failed experiment that never truly was an experiment. Place bets, man. Come on, get out there. The world's changing and you got to play your role.
Great. Well, thanks again to our panel for sharing such off-the-cuff insights and being so open and honest with us. We're going to do a quick change out. There's going to be case study breakouts, and then we're going to have some more keynotes in this room and in room 207, I believe, featuring Tumi and Shinola. So thanks again for joining us, and thanks to our panel.